The Here Comes Solar program provides technical assistance for any building owner. So you can be a landlord, you can be a renter, any type of New Yorker can have access to energy. It's really easy to figure out what you need for your building and for yourself.
Welcome to Climate Check, Stories and Solutions for Fighting Climate Change. We are part of 350 Brooklyn, an organization that strives to counter the climate crisis through local action. We work towards a world that is just, equitable, and sustainable, and where all beings can thrive. I'm Eva Dean, she, her, your host of Climate Check. I'm a climate activist and a Brooklyn-based choreographer. Today we have Angelica Ramdhari, who is the Director of Resilient Solar at Solar One. Solar One is a not-for-profit organization whose mission is to foster sustainability and resilience in diverse urban environments. Angelica focuses on the deployment of solar projects in the high-barrier New York City energy storage market, directing the design and installation of several photovoltaic and storage projects in Brooklyn and the Bronx. Hi, Angelica.
Hi, Eva.
Thank you for coming. It's really a pleasure, and I just have to tell you that our team is very excited, I should say, that you're here. So we're really happy to have you here. And Solar One has a history with 350 Brooklyn, and we'll maybe deep dive into that a little bit later. But first, could you introduce yourself and your pronouns?
My name is Angelica Ramdhari. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Resilient Solar at Solar One.
Can you start with telling us your story about why you got involved in climate and the climate crisis?
My story begins before I was born. So my family's from Guyana via India, and we're, in a sense, a product of the diaspora, always migrating to get away from climate disasters. So at some point, my parents ended up in New York, and then I was born. I'm a native New Yorker.
Did you stay in New York? Did you go somewhere else?
So I was born in Queens. I lived in that same area in Ozone Park until I finished the third grade, and then we moved to South Florida, where it was much warmer, no snowstorms, and you could run out for a gallon of milk without needing to worry about slipping on ice.
What is the mission of Solar One?
The mission of Solar One is to design and deliver sustainable solutions for every New Yorker, and essentially to allow everyone to access equitable and affordable energy. So everything that we do is designed around that principle.
You're the Director of Resilient Solar at Solar One. How does Here Comes Solar fit into Solar One?
The Here Comes Solar program is the technical assistance program at Solar One, where we interact with individuals who want to adopt the technology themselves. So that could be a co-op building, that could be a single-family home, that could be a renter down the street. In my case, my program works with batteries as well. That's why it's resilient. So we help different community facilities adopt that technology. So if you have any technical questions about incentives, tax credits, how the technology works, what you need, that's what our team does. And we have a bunch of people that work on different buildings. We work with the Retrofit Accelerator. We work with NYCERDA in their new iteration of their Clean Energy Hub. And yeah, we are a cross-collaborative platform that our goal is to get people information. So we give you information.
What do you do at Solar One on a day-to-day basis? You have a team.
Yes.
What do you do?
There are many teams. So I just talked about the Here Comes Solar team. We have an education team that works with K through 12 students throughout the 5 boroughs. We're also branching into upstate New York and New Jersey to provide educational tools and trainings for teachers to help their students with the environmental learnings that they need. We have a workforce training program and a lab in Long Island City where we train really hard to employ people in the skills needed for the green transition. And we are stewards of Stuyvesant Cove Park, where we are going to be building a new building there that will be a showcase of different renewable energies and function as a classroom for people to learn about all of these things even more.
You're the director of Resilient Solar. What do you do?
My role is an intermediary. So I make sure all of the parts are moving and communicating with each other and nothing's getting left behind. My program is funded with federal funds. It has a really long acronym, CDBGDR funds, which is Community Development Block Grant Disaster Relief Funds. And those are funds that are specifically designed to help communities recover from disasters. Recovery being the key there, not prevention. So my projects are deploying solar plus storage for community facilities. And that started with identifying facilities that can host this type of technology in Brooklyn and the Bronx, which is harder than you'd think.
Who do you communicate between?
I communicate with the homeowners and the contractors.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So you're like the liaison. You're the
Yeah.
person who can communicate with someone like me if I wanted solar on my building.
Yeah.
And the contractor.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm so glad you're here today. Can you tell us about a project from Here Comes Solar that involves a private home or apartment building or building here in New York City?
Sure. Many years ago, I worked with a fairly new solar contractor on a landmarked building on 9th Street in Brooklyn. As landmarks was a new process for them, I worked with this contractor to essentially show line of sight of what the solar panels would look like. So instead of using like your typical materials to mock up what an installation would look like, we measured the height of one of the surveyors that was on site with us, put something on top of his head to get to the rest of the height of the topmost point of the solar panels, and that's how we started the landmark process with
High
them.
tech.
Yeah, exactly.
Was the building a brownstone? There were a lot
It
of
was a brownstone.
It was a brownstone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so challenging to do solar in brownstones because you have so little space and you have to
Right.
work around everything else.
Right. So because it was a landmark building, you had to account for the visibility from a sidewalk perspective.
Right. Yeah. Landmarks in this area in particular are quite contentious. There's always this battle between wanting to be more green and have renewable energy, but then wanting to keep the historic nature of the neighborhood and not see anything, which makes that very limiting.
So it's great that Solar One can help navigate those departments in New York City. That's
Absolutely.
wonderful. Solar power seems to be this mythical thing. Can you explain to our listeners just what exactly solar power is and can do for us New Yorkers?
You can think of solar power as having a power plant on your house or in a field or nearby. And there's a few different types of solar power. But the most typical type of solar that people do in New York City is residential solar, where you have solar panels on your roof. It takes the direct current from the sunlight and turns it into alternating current that your building can then use for electricity. And the way New York City works, you need to be connected to the grid in order to get incentives and essentially sell back energy when you're not using it and have electricity at night because solar panels only produce energy when the sun is out.
When the solar energy comes in, how does it move into a building? And can the building use it directly? Or does it have to automatically go into the grid?
The other big component of any solar panel system is the inverter. So the inverter is what does the actual change from sunlight to electricity for your home. That inverter is connected to your breaker panel. So the energy all gets fed into your breaker panel. So instead of getting electricity from Con Ed, you're getting it from your roof. And any extra then goes into the grid. So back in the olden days, we used to have these analog meters that would spin a wheel forward and backwards. A lot of people love doing solar because your wheel would then spin backwards because you were sending energy into the grid and accruing credits that would help reduce your bill. So they're now rolling out smart meters, which are really cool because in addition to being able to do remote readings and have a digital reading as well, you can also fairly easily get interval data, which is really important for batteries. Smart meters are all over the country already. It's not surprising that we're a little slow to adopt it in New York City.
If I heard you correctly, the solar panels feed energy directly into our homes, and what we don't use goes into the grid.
Right?
Now we're going to talk about batteries. And I'm very excited to talk about batteries in New York City. And Solar One has done some really good work working with the fire department. So my question is, can you tell us first how the solar energy decides to go into the battery or the grid?
Oh, yeah, that's really easy. You can do it with
For
an app.
you, it's easy.
Well, I mean, it's something that's pre-programmed into
I
the
see.
technology. So there are companies that monitor the energy markets and the different incentives to see how to optimize your return, which is really important because batteries are really expensive right now. So that's where the movement is right now. So typically, if you have a battery, and unless you're living in like a super congested zone, I forget how Con Ed defines it, but if you're in one of those zones that where you have a lot of peak usage, like Park Slope is one of them, your battery isn't going to be that beneficial unless it's at another time. So if you live in Park Slope and you install a battery, you would be incentivized to discharge the battery and send energy back into the grid at a certain time because we use so much energy here. And I say we because I also live in Park Slope.
Oh, okay. Okay. In your Here Comes Solar projects, if I, as a regular old person that lives in a 4-unit building here in Brooklyn, can I come to you and say, help me navigate this system so that I can have solar energy on my building?
Absolutely. The Here Comes Solar program provides technical assistance for any building owner. So you can be a landlord, you can be a renter, any type of New Yorker can have access to energy. And I'll talk about renters first because most of New York City is comprised
Rental,
of,
yeah.
If you're a renter, best thing to do is advocate for your landlord to install these systems, but they have very little motivation to do so. So what you can do as an individual is subscribe to community solar. So community solar is essentially like getting your electricity supply from solar that's not on your building.
I want to do this. How do I apply for community solar?
There's a couple of different companies that are doing the installations, and some of them are also managing the credits. This is a relatively new program in New York City, so again, it's continuously evolving and very complex, which is why I think there are so few people who are signed up for community solar. But Here Comes Solar helps with that. If you go on the Here Comes Solar website, they show you which projects are available for you to subscribe to, and then you have to input some of your bill information. And the nice thing about community solar is you have a guaranteed savings in addition to participating in renewable energy, which is awesome.
That was going to be my next question is, am I going to pay more for community solar?
Absolutely not. We want more people to help fund the renewable movement and not scare them away from it.
Yeah. So I have gone onto the Con Edison website and tried to do it from there. And I know I'm naming a name, but that is our main grid energy provider. Would I go directly to Here Comes Solar and sign up through them and they would communicate with Con Ed?
Here Comes Solar is more like an intermediary. And Here Comes Solar would connect you to the developers who are doing these projects. They'd facilitate getting the information that the developers would need and making sure your needs are also met. So if you only want to offset 10% of your energy with solar, then you're only subscribing to that amount. Like I said, it's really complicated. A lot of people are familiar with energy ESCOs, and those are typically what you see on the Con Ed website where you can buy your energy supply from someone else, like Green Mountain Power. But the difference is community solar is actually hyper-local distributed energy. You are subscribing to something in your community, supporting local development of jobs, of those installations, and that's what makes it more difficult.
Right, right. Well, hopefully we can get the system better
Yeah.
so that it's as easy to sign up as an
Yeah.
ESCO. Why is it guaranteed that it's going to be cheaper if you do community solar?
The state, through NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research Development Authority, incentivizes community solar projects to be affordable. So without their support, you wouldn't have guaranteed savings. And that's the case for pretty much any renewable technology in New York State. They help subsidize that to make it more attractive for people to develop the projects.
Thank you for that. I'm going to do it. Here comes solar. Find a local developer and start saving money.
Absolutely.
And also helping to transition to New York City to solar energy.
Yeah. There's another program I'll talk about that Here Comes Solar does, and I was super excited to work on in the past year, and it's called Barrio Solar. So typically the person who installs solar in New York City pays cash for their installation, and this is something that can cost between $20,000 and $70,000.
And you're talking about someone
in a residential building. Yeah.
Like a 3-4 story
Yeah.
residential building.
Yeah, so you could have, let's say, $70,000 would be the max for a 4-unit building. So the Barrio Solar program is aimed at helping low-income homeowners. So people who've been living in their homes, or they've had homes that have been passed on from generation to generation, so that they can also afford this renewable technology. Through a grant from Enterprise Community Partners and with Fifth Avenue Committee, a local Brooklyn nonprofit, we're administering grants that are based on income that help offset this cost. And it's different from anything else because it's just cash you get back. If you are at a certain AMI level, area median income, you get back this cash to help support either upgrading your building's electrical system or just general building maintenance costs that help you go solar because you wouldn't do it otherwise.
For our listeners, can you tell them how to access the Barrio project so that they can start to get grants to go towards their solar projects?
The state actually came out with another program to help single-family homes, and it's called The Hub, and it's somewhere where you can go for resources with all sorts of renewable energy adoption, including community solar, solar on your roof, heat pumps, all of that. That's coming up this year, but for now, if you just go to herecomesolar.nyc, that has resources for any building type, any person living in New York City, and it's really easy to figure out what you need for your building and for yourself.
What is your vision of the clean energy economy for New York City?
After working on really small projects in the clean energy world for the past decade or so, I think it's great that individuals are adopting technology and trying to do things themselves to help with the movement, but I think the change really needs to happen at a larger scale. So one of my passions and one of the things I hope to see happen in the near future is all of these very dirty, polluting peaker plants to go offline and to be replaced by batteries. That's a really easy solution. Well, not easy, but it's a really good solution to a ton of problems because as we electrify, we're electrifying on a grid that is dirty. Even if you have solar panels, it's very hard to offset your entire electric costs as it is. If you electrify more, it'll be even harder.
Just briefly, tell us what a peaker plant is.
A peaker plant is a very specific type of power plant that goes on when a lot of people, let's say, turn on their lights at once.
Or all of us in New York City have our air conditioners
Right.
on in August
Right, exactly.
at the same time.
Right. So it's a system that's designed to support the grid when it would be stressed. So it adds an additional influx of energy.
So you would like to replace that fossil fuel burning, hyper energy consumption, polluting peaker plant that is often in low income communities.
Right.
You want to replace that with what? One of these batteries that Solar One is working on?
Well, it would be more than one. It would be a gigantic energy storage system.
Yeah.
But it still wouldn't take up the footprint that a peaker plant takes up right now. It would be pretty large scale, and that's novel in New York City, but not novel elsewhere. You have these types of installations in Arizona and California, and sometimes there have been tragic fires. That's why it's so hard to do battery installations in New York City because of the safety regulations.
Right,
around
and
them.
why one of the departments that you're navigating at Solar One is the fire department, and you
Right.
have a really good relationship with them. The peaker plants and replacing them with these cleaner storage to green the electrical grid
Yeah,
so that all of the electricity is coming from green energy
right,
rather than fracked gas or fossil fuels.
right.
If you're interested in fighting the peaker plants and or greening our electrical grid, you could start with going on to 350 Brooklyn's website because
Absolutely.
one of our strengths at 350 Brooklyn is we work in coalition. How can our listeners get involved in your work?
A lot of current collaborators and employees of Solar One actually started off as volunteers. If you have time and energy, we always love to do local outreach, which is a really good way to spread the word about renewable energy. If you are associated with a workforce organization or you have people that want to get trained, we offer that service. We have a great lab in Long Island City now where we train people on green building skills. So we're not up to batteries yet, but you can certainly learn how to deploy solar panels, which is really hard work. I've tried it. I don't think I'm built for it, which is why I do something else, but you can do it that way too.
It's a good green job and with fair wage.
Most of the time.
Oh, sad.
Yeah. I think it really depends on who you work with. I think that's one of the reasons why people go to Here Comes Solar. We vet the contractors and make sure they're reasonable people that are going to uphold their warranties and pay their workers well. And not only that, we now have in our RFPs, our request for procurement, we have a stipulation that workforce trainees are hired to have on-the-job training so they can get more experience and get hired as well. Because that's one of the problems with training. You can get as much training as you want, but people have to be willing to hire you. And that's a risk, and we're helping make that happen.
All the more reason to go to Solar One, and I'm just so glad you're here doing this important work. Is there anything else that I missed that you'd like to add?
This is going to sound strange, but it was something I was thinking about last night. The whole power system is not empowering. It's very hard for you to make your own decisions on where your energy comes from, how you're connected to the grid. So my plea to the listeners is to reduce your electricity consumption because that is something you can control. And that's the easiest way to reduce our current climate crisis. If you turn off your lights, turn off your AC, things like that, I think, are more valuable when the cost of technology is just so expensive and it's really hard for people to do it. So that is one empowering step you can have for your power.
It has been such a pleasure talking with you today, and the work that you do at Solar One is so needed and helping us to transition. And I hope that we get to a place of empowerment with our power. And I do feel that Solar One is helping us to navigate these departments in New York City so that we can have clean energy on our rooftops. And I hope our listeners are encouraged to put solar energy on their buildings if they're able, and that they now know that they can go to NYSERDA and Solar One for fair, good, well-developed solar energy that we can put into the grid.
Absolutely. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
That's it for this episode of Climate Check, Stories and Solutions. Thanks for listening. To subscribe, go to climatecheck.fm. Climate Check is a production of the Climate Idea Exchange of 350 Brooklyn in Brooklyn, New York. Stay up to date with our releases by following 350 Brooklyn on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our production team is Alyssa Kropp, Barbara Schroeder, Bryn Fuller-Becker, that's me, Peter Kamali, Claire Schertz, Phoebe Miller, and Michael Dondero. The music you heard in this episode is from Blue Dot Sessions. 350 Brooklyn is a local affiliate of 350.org, a worldwide grassroots climate organization. Join us in finding solutions to counter climate change.